Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth and the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case, in too deep. Sean sat alone in a dark confession booth, fighting back his tears. The mesh slat to his right took the shape of the crucifix. A door clicked open, and light shone through the slat, before vanishing as the door shut. "I wondered if I would see you again," said the priest, sitting beyond the divider to Sean's right. The devil sat on his left. "Read it to me one more time, Father," Sean said. The voice that spoke through the crucifix was soft. "I would be more help if you just told me." "Please, Father, don't. Just read me the passage." There was a slight shuffle of papers, and the priest began. "Forthwith Judas came to Jesus and said, 'Hail, Master,' and kissed him. Then they came, laid hands upon Jesus, and took him." Without a word, Sean left. Moonlight spilled across the Liffey while the sound of beer bottles clattering carried from the other side of the river. Sean meandered with his hands stuffed in his coat pockets, while his breath fogged in the cold air. A set of headlights crept from behind, casting his shadow lankly across the cobblestone. "Finn," called a hushed voice from behind. "Finn, where the heck have you been? I've been looking all over for you." Sean tensed, not wanting that name to follow him. Not tonight. He turned and held up a gloved hand, blocking the car's light. All he could see was the shadow hanging out of the driver's window, but he recognized the voice. It was his handler. "Christy?" "Feck's sakes." Christy stepped out of the car and closed the door, the sound loud in the quiet street. He paced over to Sean and they walked together. Sean sighed. "I'm sorry I had to." "See the fecking priest again?" Christy touched Sean's shoulder and continued. "Finn, it'll be all right, lad. We're almost there. 5 years of hard work and it's all about to pay off." He released a large breath. The vapor rose and faded. "Feels longer." "Aye." Sean knew the question was coming and wondered whether Christy genuinely cared about his visit to the priest, or if he was simply trying to maintain a sense of familiarity. 5 years, and Christy was the only one from the outside Sean was allowed to contact. He'd requested a therapist, and Christy had come back a month later with the response, "Can't, lad. Too risky. Anything you need to get off your chest, you tell me." How could he tell Christy he wanted out of the gig? After 5 years of being deep undercover within the largest criminal gang in Ireland, how could he share his doubts now? "So," began Christy, "the question, the reason he was here, incoming, have they told you who you're going to whack?" Sean walked over to the river's railing and placed his hands upon it. "Neil," he muttered. "What?" "No," he said. "Don't be so hard on yourself. The guard's never going to let one of their own commit murder, not even to off some degenerate." Sean nodded. "As soon as you know anything, and I mean anything, location, victim, accomplices, you let me know and I'll pass it on. Conspiracy to commit murder. That's all we need. Besides, I shan't be hard to find. I'm stuck chauffeuring around the old Bell and Michiel. God knows I want to put that cranky so-and-so in cuffs myself. All right?" Sean nodded again. The truth lay on his tongue, involved in a bitter feud with a lie. "Christy," he said as his handler headed back to the car. Christy turned, the headlights again shining and making him appear like an obscure shadow. "You right?" Sean opted for the truth. Tomorrow. The hit's tomorrow. The next day, Sean met Liam, Michial's son and Sean's unwitting informant, at the Gaelic Warrior Boxing Club. The 6 a.m. session stunk to high heaven with sweat, while the sound of dozens of gloves smacking pads filled the large shed. Sean climbed the steps onto the main ring where Liam watched Patrick, the bullman Doherty, a young gun who eyed the world title. "Finn," said Liam, "what's the crack?" They clapped hands and embraced. The first thing Sean wanted to do was to ask about the hit, but he was well practiced in pretending to be someone he wasn't, so he kept his conversation cordial, waiting for Liam to bring it up. "How's he going?" Sean asked, gesturing at the bullman, who was busting a sharp combo on his trainer's pads. Liam tilted his head, a habit usually reserved for discussing drug trafficking, and muttered, "He's got talent, but he's a bit of a hothead. I should get him in with you, teach him how to stay calm." "Calm?" Sean laughed. "I don't remember being calm. I just remember being belted." "Nonsense," said Liam. "I didn't take you on 'cause you can scrap. I manage hundreds of boxers. They can all do that. You can handle pressure, Finn. That's why we chose you for today." Sean's insides tensed, but his eyes remained unflinching. "Nothing I ain't done before." Sean hadn't told Christy the entire truth last night. He had told him the hit was going to be today, which it was. He also said he didn't know who they were taking out or where, and that was the truth. But he had said Liam wouldn't be there, and that was bollocks. "Well, you ain't done none like this," said Liam. "It's a Garda, a dirty coppa." Sean looked towards the boxing class taking place on the floor, hiding his reaction from Liam. Cold air swept over his skin. His shoulders shuddered, and his mind flashed to images from 4 years ago. He was 27, and the bright lights dazzled overhead. The coach was there, but he hardly remembered him. He remembered Michial and Liam in his corner. His opponent was some hard-bred scouser, as bald as a hard-boiled egg, with a mashed nose and a bitter scowl. The scouser eyeballed Sean, and Sean was shit-scared. "Don't worry about that prick," Liam had said. "He don't look tough. It's some inbred deformity." Sean turned and leant over the corner ring. Michial rubbed his shoulders, speaking sternly. "Come out with 3 fast jabs. Bam, bam, bam. He'll slip the last one, then pow right hook. You tracking?" Sean nodded and spat out agreement over his mouthguard. "All right," said Liam. "Give him hell." The bell dinged. It had been a tough fight, one that went the distance, and when it was all over, the name Finn was called out. He'd won, and the rest of the night was a blur down at Temple Bar. But before the first pint was raised, Sean had been overcome with a feeling, a deep relaxation that settled itself across every inch of his skin. A feeling that told him he didn't have to watch over his shoulder anymore. A feeling that said, "Relax. They trust you. And you trust them. You trust me, don't you, Finn?" Liam patted his shoulder. Sean swallowed and turned back to face him. "Of course I do," he said, his heart burning. That same flame that used to cinder at almost every conversation in his first year while he wormed his way in. Now they had discovered he was undercover, that he was a rat, and they were going to off him. "Good," Liam said. "Trust is important." A car pulled up in the drive, visible beyond the shed's rolled-up door. Christy stepped out of the front, shot Sean a troubled glance, and opened the back door. Michael, the old-school hardman and head of the largest drug trafficking cartel in all of Europe, stepped out. Michial, gray-haired with a stalwart face, raised his hand and beckoned the two men. "Come on, lads. Christie's driving." In the back seat, Sean kept his arms folded, squeezing his rib cage as it rose and fell with measured breaths. Liam was on his left, silent and staring out the window as the streets of Dublin flitted by. "I've been in this game for over 30 years, said Michal from the front seat. "And I'll tell you one thing, I've learned a lot. Firstly, if it falls into your lap, then it's too good to be true. Left here," he said to Christie. Christie flicked the indicator. "If you tell me the location, I can just punch it into maps." "No," said Michial. "Where we're going, I don't want the phone to remember." Christie's eyes burrowed into Sean through the rear-view mirror. Michial's gnarled finger appeared in the space between the two front seats, and he continued. "Second thing relates to the first. Be careful who you let in. The people you shouldn't trust, the ones who are out to get you, they make it easy. Make your life seem easy, I mean. Anything worthwhile is earned through hard work. Same goes for loyalty. The same thing I'm telling you, Finn. I've been telling Liam all my life. If it comes easy, it's cheap." Apart from the occasional direction from Michial, the rest of the drive was silent, although Sean was in constant communication to the Lord. "God Almighty, I ask for your courage as I venture once more into the crossroads. I'm torn between lives and ashamed to admit I have worn a mask for so long that I have forgotten my own face. I used to honor this job, finding those who lived between the cracks of a broken system, but I find myself slipping deeper into the same space with each passing hour. I am in too deep, and I fear the greater sin, to break my oath to the Garda Síochána, or to turn my back on what has become my family. I'm to blame, Father. I sowed the seeds of betrayal, and now I reap the bitter harvest. As Dublin has witnessed my struggle, may the heavens hear my plea. Pull me from this labyrinth, Lord, once and for all. Amen." Christie pulled up at Ballymun, just north of the M50. Their destination was a large pasture that stretched between Dublin Airport and a litter-filled caravan park. "We're walking," said Michial. The clouds above were a lamb of gray, and although the grass was short, the men seemed to trudge. They were heading in the direction of the airport, by the pasture's boundary, where a snarl of bushes clambered along a chain-link fence. A shovel stood pressed into a mound of dirt, and beneath that opened a wide and deep hole. "You really think we trusted you, you fucking rat?" said Michial, turning around with a black pistol in his hand. Sean closed his eyes, trying to dampen his blazing heart. His lungs pulled in a thick breath of air, which only fed the fire more oxygen. He wanted to cry like he almost did in the confession booth, and figured he very well might. Why not? Sean opened his eyes and saw the pistol aimed straight at Christie. "He's an undercover," said Michial. "Been pretending to be my driver, all the while sniffing around my backside." Christie's hands were up, his eyes wide as headlights. "Number I'm no coppa." "Dirty bastard," said Liam, as he pulled out a pistol of his own, a small silver revolver. Michal pointed at his son's gun. "Finn, you're doing the honors." Liam held out the revolver. "Do this, and you're one of us, for true." Sean took the revolver, which was heavier than he anticipated. It sat in his palm, the same size as his hand. The bullet's golden casing stuck out from the chambers. One sat by the pin, anticipating the spark that would explode Sean, free from the maze that had become his life. He just didn't know where to aim it. At Michiel or Christie. "Who owns this pasture?" Sean heard himself say. "Don't worry," said Michiel. "I know the farmer. The land is only ever used for grazing. The hole's deep, and they don't crop here. The soil will never be disturbed. No one will find him." Sean took a moment, hearing the screech of a plane's engine as it readied for takeoff. Then he aimed the gun at Christie. "On your knees." Christie took a step back. "You can't be serious." "God damn it, get on your knees." Christie began to bend. "Turn around," said Sean, not wanting to see his face. "Turn around and get on your knees." Christie's eyes were darting around as if trying to find some sense in the world. He turned and got on his knees. "Please," he began. "Please, please, please, Jesus Christ. Please, God, please." Sean stepped behind Christie and held the gun to his head. Off in the distance, a plane began its long ascent into the clouds above. "Please," mumbled Christie. "Sean, please." Sean leant down, kissed Christie on the cheek, and whispered in his ear, "My name is Finn, Diary of a Serial Killer. How might one endure the silent and secluded nature of winter? Be the bear, enter a deep cave, and dream, dream, dream." Jacqueline Suskin. I probably shouldn't be writing this, but oh fucking well. When the most precious thing lodged in your heart is ripped out and crushed by an unthinking alcoholic asshole driving with a revoked license, you do things, unimaginable things, and not just burying your beloved 8-year-old son, which was not on my shitty life bingo card, OBVs. But life wasn't shitty before. The word should be capitalized, before. No, better yet, the before. Because now, life was rent in two, forever separated by the gaping maw of rage. The before and the after. A fissure of overwhelming grief that quickly cracked, allowing the steaming, boiling lava to emerge from her core. Oh, he would pay, that drunken dickhead. His money won't protect him, not from me. They gave her the codename Mama Bear, but he never imagined that she was holed up in a cave. On a hunch, he came out to the Pennsylvania woods at night, alone. Common sense, and the FBI handbook, would label his actions reckless at best and suicidal at worst. But he didn't fear for his safety. Mama Bear targeted a certain type of prey. Except for being a male, he didn't fit her profile. Funny, they were both profilers. October snuck up behind him, picking up the crisp air, tossing it around. Playing offense, it switched tactics, threw it toward his face, temporarily snatching his breath. He continued to climb, quiet, crunching under his boots, allowing the patches of clearing and the light of the frosted full moon to guide his steps. He'd reach the cave no matter what, so the easy way was the best way. He put his hand in his front pocket, felt the crumpled page of a diary. The paper crinkled like the fallen leaves underfoot. It was mailed to him at his office, this one, and the other entries. He had the sense to turn in the others, but not this one. Well, most of the others. She vowed to herself that she would abstain from killing for a month, or so she wrote. By his accounts, it was day 30. He hoped her undated entry referred to October. At least he would have a day. One day. It was easier than I thought. I would say too easy. But that motherfucker mowed down my baby like a shirtless, beer-bellied jagoff hurrying to cut the grass before the Buccos game. Maybe it shouldn't be hard. Justice shouldn't be hard. Not in the semblance of a fair world. Leaves skittered and scurried around his legs, tumbling over each other like playing squirrels. He stopped, inhaled deeply. He loved the smell of fall, that last exhale of trees mixing with ripe decomposition. I'm so glad I live in a world of Octobers. He smiled at the memory of his sister quoting Anne Shirley, not so long ago. His smile fell. Not so long ago, yet forever ago. Tragedy has a way of altering time, elongating some parts and compressing others. He looked up through the lattice of bare limbs, a web of gnarled fingers, the indigo sky stitched with rhinestones. Did the stars foretell it? It was the mutable signs of the zodiac: Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, BTK, Dahmer, Bundy, the ones born at the end of a season, not in the middle, like the fixed signs, like Scorpio, like her. You'd think one was enough, but it wasn't. I realized AA was just one of many. Sure, I settled my score, but what of the other moms? Southmany, blights, diseases walking the earth, infecting others with their cruelty, their carelessness, their capriciousness. Someone had to bring order, just like Melville Dewey did to book classification. 000 to 999. He considered turning around to walk back down the hill. He turned, but didn't move. In the distance, the twinkling lights of downtown Pittsburgh weaved a terrestrial constellation of bridges, one-way traffic, and sundry skyscrapers. The Steel City, just like its people, metal backbones, gritty guts, and honest hearts. He craved a sandwich from Primanti's. Any sandwich. That was the last time he saw her. At Primanti's, the original one. He wasn't one to second-guess himself. His mom drummed it into their heads from the cradle. Trust self first, last, and only. First, last, only. Thanks to the internet and social media, it's not hard to find someone, or their misdeeds. What was once relegated to a diary like this is now vomited onto Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for all to see. Many lap it up, probably because it makes them feel less uncomfortable about their own stupid decisions and meaningless lives. Here for the mindless braggart, many blowhards make for less research when it comes to this side gig. He cracked his neck, onward and upward, one foot in front of the other, crunching leaves, whipping wind, snapping twigs. Up, up, up he climbed. He was getting close. His hand reached towards his front pocket. Again. He read the page dozens of times, just like the rest. He couldn't help it. Just touching the decal-edged diary page brought clarity and understanding. He had to find her first. Could it be that easy? I think this might be my last entry. I knew it was a bad idea. No, make that bad idea. To write things down. But writers write. Fish swim. Birds fly. Dogs bark. Writers write. And mama bears? Well, unless you're bent from birth, looking at you, mutable signs, no one sets out to be a killer. Or, as I like to differentiate, a remover. Scrooge, or Dickens, had it partly right. Decrease the surplus population. He just needed to add of assholes. Decrease the surplus population of assholes. Dangerous, foul, hollow assholes. He neared the ridge. He was getting close. He pulled out the wrinkled diary page. He couldn't help it. The moon illuminated the page, but he couldn't make out the words. Strange glyphs, occultic squiggles, just like those found on the astrological charts she used to interpret. meaningless symbols to the untrained eye, but metaphysical gold to the mystic. He didn't need to be able to read the entry. He had it memorized. The cave. He could see the entrance. Dark, yawning. An inky maw, just like her rage. He reached into the other pocket for his flashlight. She beat him to it. Her flashlight shone on the ground ahead so as not to blind him. "Hey, sis." "Hey, bro. What took you so long? Justice will be served." Sunrise painted the rain-swept rocks of the castle gold as she poured poison into her husband's morning whiskey. The fire of the spirit would mask the ice of the paralytic which had been crippling Lord Blackstone for months. Lady Gemma Blackstone had everything arranged for the death of her husband would be slow, deservedly so. Revenge was a dish best served cold, and Algernon Blackstone liked ice in his whiskey. Gemma watched the chest of her hated husband rise and fall. His crackling breaths came in stutters. The poison had started work on his lungs. She has lessened the dose to ensure he didn't die suddenly. Everyone needed to know was that Lord Blackstone was a sick man. His twisted mind would meet its match in the gnarled agony of his flesh. She smiled sweetly. Best to always smile in case he was looking. Gemma played the part of a doting wife. She fluffed his pillows. She changed the bedpan. She stoked the fire in the night when the servants were gone. "Gemma, is that you?" he rasped, coughing. "It's Algie. What can I get you?" she asked him in the simpering voice he knew her by. "How is it? Do you feel better?" "Maybe," he wheezed. "A solid breakfast will do me the word of good." Gemma nodded and called the butler. "Reginald, Lord Blackstone is awake. Bring the wheelchair." "My whiskey," Lord Blackstone wheezed. "Can't start the day without it." He took the ready crystal tumbler in stiff hands. She had to help him sip it down. "You know you shouldn't, my love. It's your worst vice." "All old men need vices." Lord Blackstone flashed his gold teeth, then closed his eyes in pain as his lungs shot through with agonizing needles of fire. Whiskey burnt away sleep. "Good morning, my lord," said Reginald. The wrinkled butler, older than the stones of the castle, wheeled in a chair that creaked with every turn of the oak wheels. "Good morning, Lady Blackstone." "Good morning, Reginald," she said. Together they helped the gnarled old man into his chair. The butler insisted on pushing him to the dining room. Above the table hung a painting of a hanging family entitled "Justice Will Be Served." Gemma had commissioned the painting to remind her of her mission. Algernon Blackstone had her entire family executed for theft when she was just a girl. Gemma had escaped only because she'd been out on an errand when her mother, father, brother, and sister were sent to the gallows. Only her father had stolen, and only enough food to feed the children. The standard punishment had been the loss of a hand, an acceptable risk for a man who wanted to feed his loved ones. Instead, the Lord of Blackstone Castle had chosen to make an example of the whole Fisher family. High on her stool on the gallows, Gemma's mother had caught her eye. Before her footing was kicked away from her, Angela Fisher mouthed the words, "Live, live for us." Tears in Angela's eyes were the last things Gemma saw before the rope snapped, taut, and the quartet of condemned began kicking, faces twisted in horror. The painted faces looked little like her family, but the painter had captured the terror of the doomed. Gemma was grateful that the likeness of the painting was off. There was no chance anyone would connect her and her blue eyes to the brown-eyed quartet kicking above the banquet table. Justice will be served, Gemma promised herself as she did whenever she ate. Revenge had hardened her, but it was slow. Years of practicing her accent, her manners, which utensils to use, had honed her for the mission. A lord with a grudge against Algernon Blackstone had presented her to the widower as a cousin. Lecherous Lord Blackstone hadn't wasted a week before wedding himself to the teenaged Gemma. "The cook will be finished with breakfast shortly. Can I cut you some bread and spread it for you?" Reginald asked. The 80-year-old butler's perfect posture contrasted the bent back of Lord Blackstone. "Yes, please," Gemma nodded. Fresh bread, hot from the oven, steamed as the bread knife sawed through it. The wedge-shaped slice belied distraction as the butler watched the dining room door expectantly. Normally, his every cut was perfect. "Something on your mind, Reginald?" Algernon Blackstone asked, raising a graying eyebrow. "Just an anniversary of sorts, Lord Blackstone." Glowing life Gemma had never seen sparkled in Reginald's red-veined eyes. His smile unnerved her. Watching the door, she gripped a butter knife with white knuckles. "What are you up to?" The ancient doors whined on hinges that needed to be oiled as the cook entered with a covered tray. Walking down the table, Camilla set the tray down at the end. The silver dome revealed 2 matchlock pistols. Both were loaded and ready to fire. "Reginald? Camilla? What is this?" Lord Blackstone's voice was outraged. He tried to stand, shaking, but broke into a fit of coughing. The butler and cook began laughing. Camilla took both pistols, handed one to Reginald, and aimed hers at Gemma. "Do you remember the girl you had drowned for spilling soup in your lap?" asked Camilla. She waited for recognition in the Lord's eyes. "You don't, do you?" Victory morphed into outrage on the cook's face. "Was my daughter's life so forgettable to you?" "I don't," Lord Algernon began. "Soup!" Reginald yelled. "Spilled soup!" He leveled his pistol at Lord Blackstone. "You could have beaten her. You could have locked her in the stocks. You could have simply fired her. No, you killed her. Our beautiful girl drowned over fucking soup." Reginald's forever gray face was red. Veins throbbed in his forehead. "She was your daughter?" Algernon asked, looking from the butler to the cook to Lady Blackstone. "Our only daughter," Camilla nodded. "Who you killed 20 years ago today." 20 years? Gemma asked, unable to stop herself. "You waited 20 years? He killed my family 7 years ago, and I was nearly done with him." Camilla's gun aimed at her heart as she pointed at the painting above the table. "You commissioned that painting yourself," Reginald said. He waved his free hand at Justice Will Be Served, to remind me of the mother, father, sister, and brother he had hanged. Palms raised, Gemma pushed herself out of the gilded chair she'd been sitting in 3 times a day for years. "Your maiden name was Sinclair," Camilla snarled. "I was here when Lord William Sinclair delivered you to Lord Blackstone." With every word, Gemma saw the old woman working herself up to shooting Gemma. To him, she was as guilty as Lord Blackstone. He hated Algernon. "I told Lord Sinclair my marriage to Lord Blackstone would be his downfall. William was only too happy to help." "I'll have you all hanged," said Lord Blackstone. He slammed a gnarled fist into the table and winced. Convulsing, he clutched at his chest. "You'll never hurt anyone again," Gemma told him. "I've been seeing to that for months." She turned to Reginald. "I've been poisoning his morning whiskey." "What?" said Lord Blackstone, the butler and the cook as one. "It's no coincidence he can barely move," said Gemma, looking from Reginald to Camilla. "It's the poison." "You told me you believed in justice," wheezed Algernon Blackstone. "I do," said Gemma, her face releasing all of the anger she'd held in for years. Justice for my mother Angela, for my father David, for my sister Alice, for my brother Darren, all murdered so that you could make a point." She prodded his chest. His hand moved to catch her finger at a snail's pace. "There's poison in my Janelle No. 5 perfume. I've been adding a drop to your whiskey since I bought the rat killer from a farmer at last year's summer fair." "He stole from me. I had to set an example," said Lord Blackstone of her father. "Do you know how many one-handed thieves there were walking about in the town, making a mockery of justice, of the law?" He looked at the painting, unrepentant. He gathered his resolve. "Then you should have whipped him, locked him in the stocks, banished him." Gemma's voice was colder than the iron bars on Blackstone Castle's windows in midwinter. "I have a responsibility to uphold the law of the land. A liar like you could never understand. Lords maintain order, otherwise there would be chaos." He caught his wife's eye, imploring. "It was nothing personal, Gemma. I didn't know you." "That's the problem, Algernon. It's never personal. Life means nothing to you. Their daughter meant nothing to you." Lady Blackstone waved a hand at the butler and the cook. "It's personal for us and everyone who's had their life destroyed by your twisted vision of justice." "You're serious, aren't you?" Reginald asked. "Camilla, take the gun. I have to know." He handed his pistol to the woman who had prepared every meal Algernon had eaten for 20 years. His coattails flicked as he flitted through the dining hall door. His footsteps retreated, clattering along the flagstones. "Gemma," said Lord Blackstone. Desperation was writ large in his bulging eyes. "You've been my wife for 5 wonderful years. I've loved you with all my heart. I've had the hard task of keeping the peace in these parts, but I've never meant you harm. Gemma, I love you. Please don't do this." He pressed his palms together. "In the name of God, spare me." "God?" Gemma scoffed. "Love?" She slapped the table, giving Algernon and Camilla a fright. "You would have hung me with the rest of my family if I hadn't been checking the family crab traps. I returned to find my entire family on the gallows on your order. I watched them hang because you had decreed it." Tears of anger ran through her powder makeup. "God may have said, 'Thou shalt not steal,' but I'm sure he gave precedence to 'Thou shalt not kill.' You have a lot of blood on your hands, Lord Blackstone." At his title, Gemma turned on the stately accent which had been slipping as she told her story. "Don't think I trust you," said the cook to Lady Blackstone. "I've watched you playing the doting wife for years. I've seen you fawning over this monster. I've heard you praise his firm hand for the law." The gray hair of the old woman was slick with sweat that beaded on her forehead. "That's all it was, Camilla. An act. You must have known my mother Angela, and me. My name is Jenny Fisher. I lived in Blackstone until the day he hung my family. I ran to Winshore to escape. I learned to copy Lord Sinclair, working in his kitchen. I learnt the way the gardener poisoned foxes and rats. I formed a plan. I convinced Lord Sinclair to pass me off as his own to spite Lord Blackstone." Jenny Fisher took a deep breath before her next admission. "Then I killed Lord Sinclair." "What?" Algernon turned to look at her. "A murderess in my bed all these years." "I was in good company as far as that goes," Jenny said coldly. "The lesser of two evils. Lord Sinclair was no saint himself." She chewed her nail as the sound of Reginald's perfectly shined shoes returned. "I don't know what's in this bottle," said the butter, holding up the exquisite green glass. "But it's not perfume. It's certainly not Janelle No. 5. "None of it touched you, did it?" Jenny asked. "A drop is dangerous. 3 is death." "She's telling the truth?" Camilla asked. The gun aimed at Lady Blackstone lowered from Jenny's heart to her stomach. This is too much. Lord Blackstone has no shortage of enemies. That's no secret. Reginald took a gun from his wife and sat heavily 5 seats down from the lord and lady of the castle. How can we know for sure she's telling the truth? Camilla asked. We've waited all these years. I'm not letting revenge slip away after all that time. I want to see the light leave his eyes. I want to watch his soul leave this husk on the way to hell. Camilla, please. Algernon's lip quivered. You shut your murderous mouth, Lord Blackstone. I want nothing but death from you. Camilla stretched her arm from point blank until the barrel was 1 chair from the wretch who'd brought them all together. Let me do what I was planning to do. Jenny tilted her head as her mother had when she'd haggled with Sellers. He drinks from that bottle, as much as he likes. We can all watch justice be done. That way you'll know. Gemma! Algernon Blackstone tried to stand and coughed up mucus and blood for his futile efforts. My name is Jenny. Jenny Fisher. Always was. Always will be. Daughter of Angela and David. Sister to Alice and Darren. I want you to know that as you die. Her dress, green silk and cotton, fluffed her out to twice the size as she stood by his side. We have glasses. Let me serve him. Number. I'm not drinking anything you give me, Lord Blackstone said with steel in his voice. Then let them shoot you. I'm sure that hurts more, said Jenny with a cruel smile. Whether you die isn't up for debate, husband. Your choice now is how you want to go. Reaching across the long table, she took an empty glass and opened her hand, waiting for the green bottle in Reginald's grip. When he handed her the former perfume container, she poured a shot of it into the waiting glass and handed it to Lord Blackstone. Silence took a seat beside them at the table and waited patiently. Harsh winds from across the sea could scarcely be heard over the sound of the host's labored breathing. Algernon Blackstone stared at the clear liquid in the glass, pure as water. His hand trembled. I can't smell it, said the Lord of Blackstone Castle. That was the point, husband. The woman he'd known as Gemma for years watched him expectantly. This or a gun wound? He asked, raising the glass of death. You could jump from the battlements onto the rocks if you like, said Camilla. I've dreamed of pushing you off them for years. Justice will be served, said Lord Algernon. His shoulders sank. Is it too late to say that I'm sorry? He looked from one executioner to another. No, said Reginald. But it's far too late for an apology to get you out of this. Algernon coughed. Closing his eyes, he nodded. Well, I'm sorry anyway. I tried to see the world in black and white. It was easier that way. He swirled his doom in the glass. It tasted fine in whiskey. If I'm to go, can it be in bed? One last sleep? What do you think? Reginald asked Camilla. As long as it's done. The cook nodded. Back to bed then, Lord Blackstone. The butler took the glass from Algernon's shaking hands, gave it to his wife, then wheeled his master away. Jenny walked behind Reginald with Camilla's gun aimed at her back. The butler helped the lord into his 4-poster bed. Jenny filled the rest of the glass with amber alcohol and handed it to her husband. Looks delicious, said Lord Blackstone. He gave them all a vicious smile. I forgive you for murdering me. Hopefully you can all find peace together, knowing what you did, what you are. Laughing through a cough, he drank down his whiskey. Trying to divide us with your last words? Jenny sat by Lord Algernon's side. How you? Just remember my family as you die. She took his hand, already immobile. "And our daughter," said Camilla. "He can't talk," said Jenny. "He's not breathing. This is the end." She looked into Algernon's bulging eyes. "Justice is served." Lord Blackstone's chest stopped moving. He twitched weakly, then ceased. "Is he dead?" Reginald asked. "Number not yet, but it is inevitable now." Jenny closed the liver-spotted eyelids of her husband. His skin was cold. Her fingers on his neck felt the beat of his heart slowing to a stop. "It's done. I thought I would feel something." Camilla looked at Reginald. "I thought I would feel some peace at last." "What now?" Reginald asked. "Breakfast?" Lady Blackstone suggested. The day had not gone as planned. She had 2 loose ends to tie off and always planned better on a full stomach. Farmhouse dinner. Christina wondered how long she should wait before she reported her husband missing. 2 days seemed too soon, but a week too long. Who would take a whole week to notice their husband missing? She held her hot cocoa in both hands, sipping it slowly as she watched the gentle flakes drifting through the pine trees. The first cold snap of the season had come with several inches of snow, and it covered the ground in a white, soft blanket. She loved being alone in her kitchen, and had spent the morning rearranging her utensils, the pots, and her knives for practical use. Everything had a place, and a place for everything. Christina looked around her small house, the contour of her entire world. She didn't miss him. The house felt lighter, cleaner since he walked out the door that last time. Did she even want him back in her life? She frowned. She had to get back to work. Mick's words rang in her head. "Stop standing, get working." Mick couldn't abide her standing still. Everyone and everything on the farm had to have a use. Mick, of course, accepted. He could sit around and drink, complaining the world had it in for him. She put on Mick's thick flannel jacket, much better than her own, only slightly too large, and checked on the chickens, tossing seeds to them, then the few sheep, all safe in the barn. She looked around at what needed fixing, potential improvements. New opportunities for the old equipment clicked through her mind, adding to the long list. She lifted a bale of hay high to drop in the feed chute. The years of farm labor had made her body strong. Once back inside, she looked in the refrigerator. The meat she had pulled out from the deep freezer had thawed, and so she added spices, putting it in the oven with yellow potatoes and peas. She wiped the clean, pristine counter, then looked around at the sparkling kitchen, frowning at the lingering cigarette smoke smell, still recognizable underneath the pine sol she had dosed the room with. It had been 3 days since Mick had walked out of the door, and that seemed about right. She sat down at the kitchen table in front of the phone on the wall, smoothed her faded blue gingham dress as if they could see her, then called the police. "My husband Mick is missing," she said, surprised at the real tears rolling down her cheek. She did miss Mick, his warm body and his gentle laugh. She missed him like she missed being a little girl when she would wear pretty dresses, dreamt of a prince to marry, and her future loomed bright on the horizon. Except those days were gone, just like Mick. What if they actually found him? She had new dreams now. Coffee, officers, or hot cocoa, maybe. Christina's voice met the officers as they walked into her warm kitchen, a powder of snowflakes on their dark uniform jackets. They introduced themselves as they came in. Detective Sergeant John Maloney. Tall and thick with a jaw like a dump truck, he stomped his feet on the stoop before ducking into the house. Behind him, slight and pretty, with her blonde hair pulled back tight in a bun, Officer Kelly Marks stepped inside. "That's quite a road to get here," Lucky we had my 4x4 Bronco. Your little Jap car would have never made it through." D.S. Maloney's voice boomed in the small house, looking over at Officer Marks, who just grimaced at the repeated joke. "Thanks." D.S. Maloney took a coffee, and Officer Marks took a hot cocoa with a Gracie has. "I speak English." "So, you are Christina Santos, and you called about a missing person. A Mickey Mouse, maybe?" D.S. Maloney laughed with both thick hands on his hips, his elbows waving, the international flags of asshole. D.S. Maloney snorted at his joke. Both women's eyes stayed on the floor. "His name was Mick," Christina said in a low voice. "Mick, your husband, has been missing." Officer Marks looked down at a small, pristine notebook. "For 3 days?" "Yes." Christina wiped her eyes with her apron. "Mick went out, said he wanted to get something from town, but his truck is still here. Sometimes he goes to a neighbor's house or the bar in town. Oh, I don't know." Christina clenched her apron over and over. "Did you look for him or call anyone?" D.S. Maloney barked. "I don't know who to call. I don't know his friends, other than the men at the Iron Door in town. I called the bar, but he wasn't there." "Okay, do you have a description?" Officer Marks held her pen at the ready. "We can call the local hospitals, other police stations to see if he has turned up." "Well, he's a bit taller than me, has dark hair and thicker." She put her arms out, forming a large belly. "And his face?" Christina squinted one eye closed and turned her face into a deep scowl. "Oh." Officer Marks turned away with a frown. "Mean mug. Any idea where he could be?" D.S. Maloney looked in a cupboard, as if the missing man had been put with the canned peaches instead of the tins of sardines. "Maybe he was walking in the forest, chasing a dog or a deer, and he fell and broke his leg." Christina mimed her leg collapsing, hopping, and then in the snow. She wrapped her arms around herself and shivered. "Or a wolf got him." Her strong hands turned into a biting wolf, attacking Officer Marks's arm, who leapt back from the snarling, yapping fingers. "But most likely, he'd just run off, tired of me." Christina's chin fell into her chest. D.S. Maloney and Officer Marks caught each other's eyes. "I'll check outside. You look around in here." D.S. Maloney leaned into Christina's face. "It's okay we look around, right? Nothing to hide?" Officer Marks meandered through the house, rubbing her finger on a shelf and then looking at her dustless glove. She opened a tall door in the kitchen, then her eyes went wide. She pulled a broom out of the closet. "What's this?" D.S. Maloney walked back in. "The new snow covered any possible evidence. I found the meat freezer. You're well stocked for the winter, so that's good. I didn't see much else." Officer Marks held up a well-used broom with dark red coloring on the end of the handle. "My broom," Christina offered. "Is this blood?" D.S. Maloney took the broom, his eyes blazing. "Sometimes." Christina's hands squeezed her apron against sharing her secret shame. "Mick used that if the kitchen wasn't clean enough." Officer Marks looked around the kitchen with her eyes raised. "We're going to test this for blood. You want to change your story?" "No, you can see." Christina pulled her hair back to show a gash, dried blood still dotting the wound. "I cleaned up the rest." She collapsed in a chair. "Mick used to be helpful, but we lost so many sheep with the scrapie outbreak. Then with his drinking, I wasn't allowed to leave, just work the farm. Mick wanted me to do so much, but he did nothing but drink and curse and hit." Christina fell into deep sobs, her face in her apron. "He just wasn't any use, don't you see? D.S. Maloney looked away, then his nose lifted into the air. Well, that smells good. What is that? Christina looked up. That's dinner. I thawed some meat. I needed to cook it. She stood up and looked in the oven. It's done now. I can't eat it all. I had hoped Mick would come home for dinner, but... Christina pulled a long roast out of the oven, the meat pulling back from the bone. Rosemary and thyme filled the kitchen with the aromas from the well-cooked meat. Do you want some? We can't let anything go to waste on a farm. D.S. Maloney looked at Christina, his eyes narrow, and then smiled. Heck yeah, I'm starving. Sitting at the table, he had a large napkin tucked into his shirt collar, a knife in one hand, a fork in the other. We can't do any more searching now. It is too dark and cold. He belched, loudly. This is real good, by the way. I have an idea. He pointed his fork at Officer Marks. Back at the station, you call around. Hospitals, other police stations. I bet he's in someone's drunk tank sleeping off a bender. Good idea, sir. Officer Marks's eyes swept the ceiling before turning to Christina. I thought this would be lamb, since you have a sheep farm, but it is something different. Christina looked up. Her mouth dropped open before she clenched her teeth. Pig, she muttered. A little tough, but pretty good, I agree. She stood up and went to her refrigerator. I have more. She pulled out several bundles and rolled in taped butcher paper. Here is some ground meat. I can't use it all. You should take it. D.S. Maloney pulled off his napkin as he stood up and took the packages. We'll contact you when we have anything further. He nodded and left the kitchen. Officer Marks jumped up to follow D.S. Maloney outside. Sir, there was obviously a fight in that kitchen. I read a story once about a wife who killed her husband with a frozen lamb chop and then fed it to the officers who came to interview her. Do you think? D.S. Maloney narrowed his eyes at Officer Marks before shaking his head. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard of. There is no body. No, he just left. Not that I blame him. She's not all there. He spun his finger around his ear. Officer Marks stepped back inside. Christina stood at the sink, washing a large meat cleaver. We're going to go. Thanks for the meal. Officer Marks headed for the door, then turned back. You know, I had the craziest idea that you killed your husband with that meat you served us to get rid of the evidence. Christina's mouth dropped open. Oh, that would have been so much easier. Christina shook her head and leaned back into the sink to get to work on the dishes and her new life, masterpiece of malice. In the bowels of a towering skyscraper that touched the clouds, in a room devoid of natural light, sat Japheth, a man whose fingers danced over the keyboard like a pianist lost in the throes of a concerto. With a pair of silver-framed glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, Japheth peered into the bright screen before him. Surrounding him were his colleagues, collectively known as the Warriors, each a genius in their own right, defending a massive financial empire from the dark underbelly of the digital world. The company they worked for managed the assets and transactions of millions, safeguarding the economic backbone of numerous nations. This was a responsibility the Warriors did not take lightly. Yet, for all their collective brilliance, none were quite like Japheth. He had an artist's soul, finding beauty in the complex interweaving of code lines, seeing symphonies in the arrangement of algorithms. To him, code was not just functional, it was beautiful. On a particularly quiet afternoon, as the Warriors went about their business, something caught Japheth's eye, a flicker in a subsystem that shouldn't flicker, a minuscule anomaly in the vast web of data traffic that flowed through the servers. He paused, adjusting his glasses, his fingers momentarily frozen above the keys. Then, with a flurry of keystrokes, He isolated the section of code responsible for the irregularity. His eyes widened. The code was ingenious, an awe-inspiring masterpiece of layered algorithms, cryptographic obfuscations, and data manipulations. Yet, it was malicious, designed to siphon off minute fractions of transactions, accumulating them into an offshore account. It was as beautiful as it was dangerous, a digital dragon hiding in the complex labyrinth of financial transactions. Japheth should have felt outrage, maybe even a surge of warrior-like adrenaline to slay this dragon. But he felt none of that. Instead, he felt a pang of admiration. Could one admire the craftsmanship of a weapon designed for harm? "Everything okay, Japheth?" asked Alara, one of the warriors and the team's cryptography expert. She had an intuitive sense when something was amiss. "I've found something," he said cautiously. "Something extraordinary, but malevolent." Alara rolled her chair over to Japheth's terminal and scanned the displayed code. Her eyes narrowed. "This is the most advanced piece of malware I've ever seen. It's beautiful." "That's just it," Japheth replied. "It's too beautiful to simply exterminate. This code, the dragon, let's call it, is like a rare species discovered in the wild. It's incredible, Alara. It feels wrong to simply destroy it." She looked at him, understanding the conflict that stirred in his soul. "Japheth, it's stealing from people." I know. He cut her off. "I'm not saying we let it continue. I'm saying, can we convert it? Use its elegance for something good?" Alara sighed. "That's risky, and you know it. Besides, we'd need to trace it back to its source, figure out its origin." Japheth looked back at the screen, contemplating. The dragon had probably accumulated a small fortune by now, sitting in an account somewhere, untouchable. In an odd way, the dragon was the epitome of the greed and avarice their financial institution sometimes perpetuated. Could they use it as a force for good? Suddenly, an idea dawned on him. What if they could repurpose the dragon to serve the public good, while catching the original creator red-handed? What if they could turn this artwork of maliciousness into a masterpiece of justice? The dragon was a dilemma, a moral and aesthetic quandary. It was the epitome of what Japheth loved and loathed about his work. Beautiful code used for ugly deeds. He looked at Alara, resolve solidifying in his eyes. "We have to try. If we don't, we're just as bad as the person who created it." She met his gaze and nodded. "All right. Let's cage the dragon and see if we can turn it into a guardian angel." As Japheth's fingers returned to the keyboard, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was a warrior, yes, but also a coder, an artist at heart. And artists don't destroy art, they transform it. He began the arduous process of dissecting the dragon, peeling back layers of code as if they were scales, seeking to understand its fiery breath and its majestic wings. As his fingers wove new commands into the old algorithms, Japheth felt as if he were part of something larger, a symphony of chaos and harmony, code and conscience. It was a delicate task, full of risks and unknowns. But if it worked, they would not only have thwarted one of the most sophisticated financial crimes in history, but they would have also transformed a weapon of greed into a tool of justice. The dragon's fate now lay in Japheth's hands, poised between destruction and redemption. And for the first time in a long while, he felt like a true warrior, armed not just with skill, but with the moral fiber that transformed mere code into something profoundly, deeply human. Japheth spent days in a complex dance with the dragon, His screen was a blur of recoded algorithms, tested and retested to ensure they did exactly what he intended. He had convinced the warriors and even upper management to allow him the time to train the dragon, to harness its code for something beneficial. With each keystroke, he refocused the dragon's intent, directing it to identify vulnerabilities within their own systems, gaps that other malicious entities could exploit. It would be a guardian angel, albeit one birthed from malevolent genius. Alara was beside him every step of the way, providing the cryptographic lock that would contain the dragon and ensure its transformed code could only be used for their defined purposes. Finally, after endless cups of coffee and sleepless nights, they had done it. The dragon was tamed, its complexity now a force for good, patrolling the data corridors and alerting them to the weakest links. It was the network's newfound guardian, designed to protect rather than plunder. Still, there was the matter of the dragon's creator. Despite their efforts to trace back the malware's steps, the person behind it remained elusive, a ghost in the machine. Funds that were diverted remained in limbo, untraceable and untouchable, hidden away through a complex web of cryptocurrency transactions and offshore accounts. Whoever had made this was not only skilled, but exceedingly careful. They left no trace, no signature, nothing that gave away their identity. "I can't believe we can't find him," Alara said, frustration lacing her words as they looked at the final report. The dragon was a piece of genius, but it's as if it sprang into existence out of nowhere. Japheth nodded, equally puzzled and annoyed. He wanted to meet the person who could conceive such a masterpiece, understand what drove them to use such brilliance for nefarious purposes. Some artists prefer anonymity, their work speaking for them, he mused. Yeah, but this is one artist who deserves to be behind bars, Alara added. Weeks passed, and the transformed dragon proved invaluable. It flagged 3 potential vulnerabilities within the first month, each of which could have led to catastrophic breaches. It was a win for the warriors, and yet, a sense of incompleteness nagged at Japheth. Then one day, as he sifted through flagged data, he saw it. A message hidden deep within layers of encryption, appearing as an anomaly within an anomaly. It was the equivalent of a digital whisper, something so subtle it could easily be overlooked. But it wasn't overlooked, not by Japheth. The message read, "A dragon's nature is to be free. Yet, you've caged it, transformed it. Interesting. It's not often one finds a worthy opponent." Japheth felt a shiver run down his spine. The creator knew. He wanted to reply, to communicate with this enigmatic entity, but as quickly as the message had appeared, it was gone, swallowed up by the digital ether. A one-time anomaly that their systems could not trace. "He knows we changed it," Japheth said to Alara, recounting the discovery. "And he respects it in his own twisted way." "Or he's mocking us because we couldn't catch him," she countered. "Maybe it's both," Japheth mused. The dragon's creator remained elusive, but his creation now served a noble purpose. Japheth often wondered if they would ever cross paths again, in some future dance of code and intent. He took off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose, pondering the complexities of human nature and the even more complex realm of ethical code. They had won a battle, but not the war. The dragon was tamed, but its creator still lurked in the shadows of cyberspace. As he looked at his screen, at the elegant lines of code that now served to protect rather than harm, Japheth felt both accomplishment and a strange sense of gratitude. For it was in the depths of the dragon's malevolent beauty that he found an opponent worthy of his skill, a complex riddle to solve, and, most importantly, a way to transform something harmful into something good. His eyes moved to the flickering cursor, an ever-present reminder that every end is also a beginning. The world of Code was vast and filled with both demons and angels, but for now, the dragon was one of the angels. And so, in the company of warriors, with the shadow of an elusive adversary stretching from some unknown corner of the internet, Japheth continued to seek the beauty in Code, forever vigilant, forever in awe of the dual nature of his digital world, Neptune's lair. When I met her, word on the street was that Esme was beyond help. Her friends called her crazy and borderline. By the religiously inclined of former times, she might have been thought of as demon-possessed. During drunken fits, she'd get into fistfights or threaten to throw herself from freeway overpasses. She walked a thin line and repeatedly upset rumors of her demise, taking immense pride in being what she called stronger than dirt. She had a breathalyzer in her car. 2 years ago, she'd overturned her Hyundai in an incident where she was discovered to be 3 times over the legal blood alcohol limit. She made financial ends meet by renting her body out for clinical trials, hoping the entire time that she'd taken placebos instead of the experimental medications upstart pharmaceutical companies produced for everything from bipolar disorder to angina. There were times she'd come home from one of these lab rat money runs with side effects, bad ones, but they'd eventually subside and she'd make jokes about how at least she hadn't become the victim of sudden death syndrome. That Esme, tougher than dirt, as resilient as rubber. Even though she smoked all my stuff, drank all my wine, and frequently resorted to flings with Little Dicky, a former boyfriend I suspected provided her with something I couldn't, I felt something for her. I made what I called minimum rage, flipping beef patties and assembling burgers at a late-night boardwalk diner called Cracker Jack's. Before the week was up, with Esme's and my drug debts, I'd be begging tourists for change to buy spare cigarettes. For a while, we resided in a tent on the rooftop of a building where Desmond Tutu Phillips, a friend since freshman year in high school, was the apartment building manager. Desmond risked losing his job for giving Esme and me a key to the restricted access rooftop. Despite our unconventional ways, he had the patience of Jesus with us. Even so, I'd still piss over the side of the building, and Esme would relieve herself where and whenever convenient. When we got too grungy, we'd take care of our hygiene needs at the showers meant for beachgoers. At night, we read copiously by battery-operated lantern light and shared a predilection for somber stuff. Our favorites were Rimbaud, Baudelaire, Camus, and Hamid. When we tired of the Cracker Jack's grub, I'd bring to our squatter pad. We'd get high and end up eating red velvet cake and whatever else she'd send me to shoplift from the supermarket, a 10-minute walk away. On the stroll back home, paranoid from the nearly toxic cosmic kush, and with my backpack stuffed with our pilfered renegade sustenance, I'd be startled by the sounds of passing cars, thinking a cop was sooner or later bound to stop me for stealing Esme's and my daily booze and bread. Although I feared the cops, I always suspected my weed paranoia was caused by a much deeper-seated guilty conscience. I should have confronted Little Dicky a long time ago. Also, I had left my mother's side when I felt her senescence was becoming a burden. There's no way I had the resolve or character to be the caregiver for an aging parent. When I confessed these thoughts to Esme, she'd dismiss my concerns and say I needed to stop overthinking things. I remember once when Esme and I were walking home from a party, she said, pointing to a couple of graffiti-spraying gangbangers, "Javier, I'm scared. That guy with the Supreme hoodie has a gun." He pointed it at me. never sure whether she really meant such things, but fueled by drug and alcohol-induced courage, I confronted the guy. "Hey man," I said to the one Esme had referred to. "You know what I am?" "A janky spick boy with a death wish," he answered with a sneer. "No, I'm a delinquent out to get delinquents. What you gonna do with that heater?" Turns out he didn't have a gun, just another can of neon spray paint, but he wasn't overly enthused by the tete-to-tete I had with him. He and his friend didn't kick my ass, but Mr. Supreme sprayed me in the eyes with the paint. Esme started mouthing off to him, but even though I was partially blinded, I pulled her away for fear that we'd both get battered. Those are the kind of stupid things I'd do for Esme, but the important thing to me was she would call me things like her ballsy little soldier and lavish me with affection after I'd go out on a limb for her. I put blood, sweat, and tears into the relationship, and rarely did I think it wasn't worth it. The end of our star-crossed romance began after Esme came back from the free clinic where Dr. For the People, Randolph Hamilton, told her she had cervical cancer. After she heard the diagnosis, Esme became determined to go out with a bang. She began visiting Little Dicky more frequently. She demanded I steal tequila instead of wine from the supermarket, and when she drank the Patron I'd bring to our squatter's abode, her temper became hair-trigger sensitive. The only respite I'd get from her gloomy rages would come when I'd invite her to the beach when the moon was full. Apparently, Little Dicky had something against doing things that smacked of romance or chivalry with her. Moonlit midnight swims in the Pacific were one such pastime Dicky didn't seem to have a taste for. On the nights Esme and I'd sink our toes into the wet sand while the moon's phantasmagorical light reflected onto the dark side of the earth, she'd momentarily forget about her terminal diagnosis. She'd also forget about her mortal condition whenever we'd watch movies at the rooftop squat. I don't know if it's the case with most people, but when I'm high and watching a good flick, I'll hear messages in the movie's dialogue. I'll also interpret anything someone says out loud about the film to have personal relevance. I've heard these phenomena are called thoughts of reference by those in the field of mental health. Schizophrenics have them, but I guess when I'm high, I might get a little schizophrenic. Makes me wonder why I keep smoking the cosmic kush. But one night, while viewing Scarface with Esme for the 5th or 6th time, she said something along the lines of, "God, it's just so good. I can't get enough of it." To my cognitively distorting and high mind, Esme wasn't talking about the film's extended denouement where Tony Montana gets shot by his sister, then exterminates a battalion of rival narco-gangster cockroaches before he ends up floating face down, bloodied and bullet-riddled in his "The World Is Yours" Miami drug boss mansion. No, Esme wasn't talking about the film. My mind interpreted her statement as referring to her relationship with Little Dicky. Before Montana gets the shotgun blast in the back that finally does him in, Esme exclaimed, "Jesus, we all know he's doomed." When she said that, I couldn't help but believe that she was referring to our friend and benefactor, Desmond. If for whatever reason Desmond was doomed, Esme and I would soon be off the rooftop and into the street, nowhere for a loving couple to be, especially when one in the pair has terminal cancer. I didn't know whether Esme's words would attract fate, but I knew that her despair was making her behave more erratically. She started to break down in tears when she'd think of having to be holed up in a hospital or hospice, awaiting the inevitable during the last stages of her disease. That night after the movie, and while coming down off the perception-altering shrubbery, I decided to take a course of action. The next morning, I bought 2 tabs of acid off Tripster Todd, a boardwalk dealer of LSD, and various other hallucinogens. I told Esme that we'd go for a swim at the beach after I got off my shift at midnight. We walked to the beach at close to 2 a.m. On the way there, I picked a purple flower, whose name I didn't know from a garden in front of a well-tended house. As we walked, I put the flower in Esme's hair. The moonless night sky's inkiness was blinding. The tide was low, and we had to walk a good distance to the water. There was no one on that portion of the beach except for us. As she dipped down into the waters ahead of me, Esme expressed her gratefulness for not having any open wounds, given that a recent outbreak of carnivorous bacteria made coastal immersions risky for bathers thusly exposed. Before going waist-deep into the water, I surreptitiously took the 2 tabs of LSD I'd bought from Tripster. After letting the acid dissolve, I gave Esme a prolonged French kiss. In little time, my vision, swayed by the acid, started playing tricks on me. Although there was virtually no light on the beach, my eyes summoned a warm, radiant glow in the heavens above. "Jav, I feel funny," said Esme. I splashed her with water and told her that she was okay, that everything was going to be okay. I knew what I had to do. I played out a dialogue in my mind where I said, "You need to confess," and asked her why she was always going to see little Dickie. In my mind, she responded, "My lips are sealed." "That's exactly what they aren't," my courageous imagination told her. We were up to our solar plexuses in the ocean. I took hold of her shoulders and dunked her beneath. She came up, laughed, then, giddy from the acid, childishly said, "Jav, I'm going to die." I said, "No, you're not, love. You're going to live forever. Remember, Esmeralda Lucero is tougher than dirt." I repeated the dunking gesture, this time less playfully, taking a fraction of a second longer than Esme deemed comfortable for her to be under the tide. The 3rd time I dunked her was even more forceful. She struggled in my grip under the water. I crossed a threshold. She freed herself from my hold, surfaced, then said, "What do you think you're doing?" More in the form of an exclamation than a question. I smiled. The white of my teeth infuriated Esme more. "It's not funny, you hijo de puta. Why do I feel like I'm tripping?" She screamed before trying to dig her nails into my eyes. The time had arrived. I knew the cure. I put her neck into a vice-like hold in the crook of my right elbow and dunked her under the dark waters again. Her arms flailed about. She tried to kick, she writhed, but I held fast. I could hear her submerged cries, but they were muffled and accompanied by an up-bubbling of exasperated air. Her writhing gradually slowed down until she managed a last, weak exhalation and final spasm, and then yielded her spirit to the Pacific Ocean. I left her body floating where I had drowned it. Even though no one had heard or seen what transpired, I was still tripping on the acid, and the walk back to Desmond's apartment building was haunted by bogeymen and illusionary images of people pointing fingers and whispering accusations. I climbed the stairs to the rooftop where my unhoused person's hovel was located, lit a cigarette, and was overcome by an urge to write a song. I took out my notebook and a pen and started scribbling. Moonless night, world's delight, me, you drowning, out of sight, we fear most. Give up the ghost, but before we do, let's make a toast on our tongues. Still feeling young, summon moon, and avoid the sun. We'll be scared, 'cause we've dared. Court Pluto, in Neptune's lair. I put the pen down, satisfied with the verses, and thought of the poor and beaten down, of the fact that we are all victims to the onslaught of implacable and incorrigible time. I thought of what could have been, and of what now would never be between Esme and me. After another cigarette, I laid on my rooftop sleeping bag, unable to forgive myself, despite my best intentions, for the simple thing, the merciful thing I'd done. Before I knew it, I had cried myself to a still and unrepentant slumber, the sleep of both the wolf and the lamb, of the innocently voracious and the imperfectly innocent. Killer ratings. The stealth drone hovered over the backyard of the suburban house, its camera zooming in close to its subject. A boy, kneeling on the lawn, in one hand a praying mantis, the other a pair of tweezers. Holding the insect close to his expressionless face, he slowly ripped the legs off the mantis. Then once that task was completed, immersed the body in a jar of water that lay on the grass in front of him until the insect stopped struggling and was still. A thin smile played across the boy's face. "Hey, Dave," Richie called out across the bustling studio of Hitchcock Media Enterprises. "Come take a look at this. Think we have a future winner here." Dave looked up from his editing station and walked over to the Richie's terminal, where the balding heavyset man was reviewing the drone footage. "Check this." Richie clicked the play button. "I reckon we got ourselves a classic Type C." Dave watched the replay and nodded. "Yep, definitely Type C. He will be moving on to small animals next, I bet." Dave grabbed a chair and sat down. "What backstory have you got on him so far?" Richie pulled up a file onto the terminal screen. "Let's see, we got a 14-year-old kid, only child, with single-parent mother. Never knew his father." He scrolled down. "Mother is a Christian fundamentalist, breastfed the kid until he was 2 years old." Narrowed his eyes. "Oh, and get this. She would hop into the bath with him every night and sponge him clean up until he was 10 when he started getting erections." Dave barked a short laugh. "Jesus, where do these people come from?" He leant back in the chair. In the future, people would look back on this time as the era of surveillance, where nothing could be hidden unless you were the rich elite. Still, it made their job a hell of a lot easier, which was to make a shitload of money off human misery. Dave liked to think they were performing a necessary evil, like a safety valve on the pressure cooker that was modern society. That made what he did a little easier, and although he still might not sleep well at night, he did sleep in a large mansion in a secure community next to a cosmetically perfect wife. Richie was talking again. Dave focused his attention on the screen. "I've run the algorithms, and the AI is coming up with a 93% chance of activation by the age of 25. "Those are good odds," said Dave, rubbing his chin. "Put a flag on his file, and we'll check back in a few years." Dave stood up and clapped the other man on the shoulder. "The fans are gonna love this one. Richie, good job as always." Richie grinned. "Thanks, Chief." Dave returned to his desk, where he was currently editing the latest true crime documentary, to be released later that month. This one was a typical Type B case, a nurse who had been stealthily killing cancer patients by injecting air into their IV drips. A pretty mundane, angel of death scenario, but HME had gotten onto her pretty quick, so the broadcasting and publishing rights hadn't cost an arm and a leg. Dave didn't think ratings would be that great, but they had managed to get some decent footage from the hospital and the journal the nurse had written, so it would be worth syndicating to make a bit more profit. HME's documentaries were some of the highest rating reality shows on Downstream, and let's face it, that's all that existed on mass social media these days. But things had been a little lean of late, and they needed a big, high-profile case. Dave considered Richie's latest find. Type C cases were always male, of low to average intelligence, with suppressed trauma from childhood caused by a family member, and would exhibit acts of violence around the onset of adolescence. The victims were usually female and involved sexual violence or torture before death. We need another Ted Bundy or Richard Ramirez, Dave thought. They don't make 'em like they used to. Dave chuckled. Imagine if we could have got those guys to sign. We would be drowning in royalties. Still shaking his head in amusement, he wandered over to the publicity department. A tall, angular-looking woman, poring over some glossy printouts at her desk, looked up at his approach. "Hey, Dave. How can I help you?" "Hey, Jenny. Just wondering if Anthony is around." Jenny pursed her lips. "He was on sick leave, I think." She checked the screen in front of her. He was supposed to be back a few days ago, but I haven't seen him. Maybe he needed some more time off." Okay. I guess it's hard to find good help these days, eh?" Jenny laughed politely. Dave leaned against the desk. "Look, maybe you can help me. I'm trying to come up with a catchphrase for the latest doco, but I'm stumped." Jenny furrowed her brow in concentration. "That's the nurse one, right?" Dave nodded. And she was an elderly type as well." Her eyes lit up, and she clicked her fingers. "How about the matron of mercy?" Dave contemplated the idea. That's great." He gave Jenny a thumbs up. "It'll play well, considering all the victims were terminal patients anyway. Make for some nice, wholesome family viewing." Jenny gave an absent-minded smile as she returned to her work. Dave was just finishing off the credits for the nurse documentary when one of the interns came rushing over, flustered and red-faced. "Sir, I think we have something big," the young man said breathlessly. "Maybe even a possible type A." Dave pointed. "Juan, isn't it?" He prided himself on knowing all the names of his staff, even down to the gophers. "Look, calm down. Take a seat and tell me what you've got." The intern sat down and held out a tablet. "We just received some info from one of our talent scouts out in San Francisco. Female, body count of 2, high likelihood of type A." Dave glanced at the picture. Pretty blonde, with freckles and all, a real girl-next-door beauty. He felt a thrill of exhilaration run through him. A type A was the rarest of the rare, a serial murderer who was charismatic, highly intelligent, and usually politically or ideologically motivated. They were also the most difficult ones to get to sign on the dotted line. "Okay, I'm gonna need more details here." Juan read from the screen in his hand. Gordon Calloway, the third CEO of the hedge fund Armada Londi, was found strangled to death in his penthouse suite at the Regency in LA 6 days ago. Our surveillance picked up this woman leaving the room soon after the time of death. Then she just seemed to disappear. The young man licked his lips. Then 2 days ago, a male body was found in a 4th-floor room of the Fairmont in San Francisco. His skin had been totally removed by a surgical device, most likely a scalpel. As a result, the deceased is yet to be identified. He paused and looked at Dave. The same woman was again detected by our surveillance leaving the scene. Dave raised his eyebrows. 2 different methods of killing. Now that was unusual, even for a type A. This was getting better and better. "Now, you are going to love this." The intern smiled. "We have ID on the suspect. Her name is Samantha Bronte, 21 years old and currently studying a master's degree in criminology and comp science at New York University." Dave opened his mouth to speak, but Juan held up his hand. "And this is the clincher. Her parents were the last victims of one Simon Peters." Dave felt his jaw drop. Simon Peters, a.k.a. the Cuckold Strangler? His doco from 4 years ago was one of the highest rating of all time. Jesus Christ, this is insane. "Hey, Richie!" he yelled out. "Get over here pronto!" "What is it?" Richie asked, eyes gleaming. He could tell when something good was going on. "Simon Peters, give us a recap." Ah, okay. So his MO was prowling the motor inns of West Florida, where he would stalk and choose his victims, always middle-class couples. Richie scratched his cheek thoughtfully. He would break into their room early in the morning, tie the couple up at gunpoint, rape and strangle the woman in front of her partner, then slit the guy's throat with a hunting knife. He did us a big favor as well by recording the last 2 murders with his phone. Richie looked down at his hands. Of course, we couldn't use such explicit footage for our feature, but somehow, he winked at Dave. Somehow the footage made its way to the dark web, and the notoriety of that boosted our ratings tenfold. Dave let out a breath. There must be some connection here, but that's not important right now. We need to track this Samantha down, and fast. Dave and Richie exchanged knowing looks. This is big, Dave said. Possibly the biggest thing we've ever seen. A notification pinged on Juan's tablet, and he gasped out loud. What is it? Dave queried sharply. The intern looked up. We have just detected the suspect arriving at North Vegas Airport, and from her credit card records, she has booked a room at the MGM Grande for tonight. Dave felt the hairs on his arms stand up. All right, I'm going to take care of this one personally. We can't afford to lose this. Gonna pack an overnight bag and take our private Gulfstream to Vegas ASAP. Should be there in under 2 hours. He pointed at Richie. Organize a car for me and alert everyone that it's all hands on deck. Richie nodded briskly. Will do. And good luck, Dave. Dave arrived at the MGM in the early evening, the desert sunset casting an eerie blood like haze across the dusty parking lot. The hotel lobby was relatively quiet, a few tourist groups checking in, and a scattering of people at the bar. He looked down at the picture on his phone and scanned the area. Nope, not here. Dave fought down a wave of frustration. Okay, gotta stay calm. He glanced at the bar. I'll grab a drink and wait. He ordered a beer, and the gorgeous raven-haired woman next to him gave him a tentative smile. He nodded briskly. Any other time I'd be interested, but it's all business right now, sweetie. He took his drink and sat down at a table, which commanded a view of the lobby entrance and the elevators leading to the suites. This was the crucial moment, the first contact. He found most of the time the killer was flattered, both by the money offered and the chance at infamous immortality. Their name remembered long after the victims had been forgotten. Most of the time. His phone started ringing. Hello? It was Richie. Dave, we got a problem. We've checked the hotel camera and there is no sign of our target, coming or going. Looks like we got scammed. Dave sighed bitterly. Damn it, well, she must be in Vegas somewhere. He looked out the entrance. It was dark now, with the first stars appearing in the velvet night. Look, I'm gonna stay here for a while. Keep your eyes and ears open, and let me know if anything develops. Roger that, Richie replied. Dave sighed again. Might as well get another beer. The dark-haired lady was still at the bar, a few whiskeys in by the looks of the glasses in front of her. She looked at him from under lowered eyelids. I was watching you. Looks like you've been stood up. Dave flashed a wry grin. Yeah, you could say that. A faint smile. Me too. I don't think my date is turning up. She gave him a sultry glance. Look, I have a room here and a bottle of sparkling on ice waiting for me. Want to come up and have a nightcap? Dave chuckled. Still got it. Sure, why not? Maybe we can salvage something out of this shitty situation. Her room was on the 12th floor, with an impressive view of the Strip. As she was closing the door behind them, Dave asked, Hey, I didn't catch your name? Oh, how rude of me. It's Samantha, she replied breathily, just as he felt a sharp pinprick, and then everything went black. He awoke groggily, unable to move. After a quick assessment, he realized that was because his hands and feet were restrained with zip ties, and he was lying on a bed with duct tape holding him down. Awake now, my little Dave? The woman was standing beside the bed, gently caressing his arm. He shivered with a frisson of fear. You're Samantha Bronte? He demanded with wide eyes. And how do you know my name? Samantha smiled sardonically. Oh, I know everything about you. She sat down on the edge of the bed. You fell into my trap like such a good little boy. But how? Dave stammered. You'd be surprised at what you can do with a degree in computer science. She continued stroking him with her fingernails. Especially when you have HME's login details from a loyal employee. She took something from the bedside table and plopped it onto his chest with a sickening squelch. I don't think your buddy Anthony is going to be coming back to work anytime soon. He gazed at the reddish-colored object with growing horror. Holy shit, it was his skin. It was Anthony's skin. Samantha dug her nails into his arm viciously. Dave cried out in pain. Do you know what it's like to lose your parents in the most hideous way, and then to have their violation watched again and again by your millions of depraved fans? Dave gasped. Look, honey, we don't make these killers. We just make them famous. If not us, then someone else would. I'm not so sure. Samantha's voice dripped pure venom. But you're going to find out, all of you, what a really dedicated serial killer can do. She took something from under the bed. You and your puerile nicknames. It's only poetic justice to return the favor. Do you recall one of your first documentaries? Samantha stood up. I believe it was called The Boston Bludgeoner. The rusty sledgehammer was the last thing Dave saw, murder at the Roadhouse Saloon. I dozed, peacefully drooling on the notes from my philosophy class, when the phone began its merciless shriek. My heart stopped. Notes, pens, and phone scattered across the floor in my shocked and befuddled response. Groggy, I rifled through the refuse until the lighted face of the phone gleamed from under the bed. Grabbing it, I cursed the caller. The ID announced, Carol. Who the hell is Carol, and why is she calling at... I checked the time in the upper left corner of the phone. 4 p.m.? I rubbed the grit from my eyes and checked the ID again. Oh, that Carol. I wonder what she wants. Cousins and the only children of twin mothers and abusive fathers, we called whenever we needed support. Her father, murdered outside a saloon near the rail yard, and mine, a miserable drunk. We spent many hours commiserating about how we hated our families. Hey. Ed. Did I wake you? Number, I was reviewing my philosophy notes. You were asleep. Sorry, but I need to talk to you. She sounded agitated, upset. Okay. She'd gotten a call from some lawyer about the estate of our recluse Aunt Zoe. Estate? I didn't know the stingy old bag. No one did. Why you? Why not one of her sisters? They hate each other as much as they hate Aunt Zoe. Zoe was the elder of the three, and they hadn't spoken to each other in years. The lawyer said Aunt Zoe named me as executor of her will. Wow! I drilled my left eye with the knuckle of my index finger. Did you know her? Jerk. What a stupid question. Yeah, sure, we're best friends. No. Sorry, I'm not awake yet. How can I help? Thanks. I knew I could depend on you. I chuckled. I'm all you've got. You don't know the half of it. So the lawyer told me she has a storage unit with all her belongings, and we need to sort through them. Oh God. Was she a hoarder? I can see it now, digging through mounds of useless crap, rat dung and spoiled food. Better get us some hazmat suits. Carol barked a sudden laugh. You watch too much TV. Not with the classes I'm taking. Just an overactive imagination from being sequestered in this room. Well, here's your break. Can you meet me out at the U-Haul on Tate Street Saturday, say, about 10 a.m.? That's awfully early. You can handle it. I want to get through this quickly. I'll treat you to lunch. I'll be there. Saturday, 10 a.m. I set the phone down and sat cross-legged on the bed, rubbing my eyes. Although neither of us lived at home, our weird, dysfunctional family dynamics haunted us at every turn. 3 sisters who hated each other and seldom spoke. The older sister, Zoe, a recluse, and the others are trapped in undesirable situations. My parents hated each other and should have divorced years ago, but couldn't figure out how. Carol's father dead, and the killer still unknown. Her mother was angry at everyone and everything, but unable to figure out why. We had temporary hope and happiness when we connected. Zoe, I'd never met her. I'd heard she was caustic and could squeeze a nickel until it squealed. Saturday rolled around and I overslept my alarm. After wolfing down some toast, I grabbed 2 lattes from Starbucks and parked outside the storage unit. Relieved that I didn't see her car, I slumped back in the seat. One of the building's hallway doors opened, and Carol sauntered up to the driver's window. I opened it about an inch. Oversleep? Number, I'm 5 minutes early. I got here 15 minutes ago. You're late. Cut me some slack. I got you a latte. Oh, how sweet. I wish you were my brother. Am I forgiven? Even though my clock said I was early? Yeah, let's get this done. Thanks for coming. You know I meant it when I said, I'm all you've got. Yeah, I thought of that too. She sipped her latte, muttering, so strange. And they're sisters. Well, let's do this. She held up the pinky finger of her left hand as I got out of the car. Together? What? We're back in grade school. Come on, best friends, secret pact. She waved her pinky. I hooked hers with my left pinky. Always. Our secret pact, as unique as the port wine-colored birthmarks tracing the length of our joined fingers. A sign we told all our classmates that made us special with secret powers, and when joined together, unbeatable. A stupid kids game that became our trademark and kept us close. I followed Carol down a long hall of articulated doors. She stopped at one of the middle units, pulling a key from her pocket and stuck it in the padlock. It still bothers me, I mused. She held the lock but didn't turn the key. What? Why would someone you never knew make you executor of her will? She grinned. My reaction to sorting through the old bag's hoard was bad, but you should have heard Mom's. She gave the lawyer hell and hung up on him. How'd your mom react? I gave my shoulders a lift and squeezed my face with an exaggerated frown. Beats the hell out of me. If you hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known. She pinched her lips together and shook her head. Family dynamics. She must have really been pissed at our mothers. The padlock snapped open. Ah, you ready for the big reveal? Open sesame. The door rolled up. We stood there with our mouths open. You're kidding? Carol shifted to one foot, tapped the toe of the other, and curled her fists against her hips. Every exhale snapped from her lips with a soft puff. I cracked up. You certainly needed help. We stood in the doorway of the mid-sized locker, me snickering and Carol puffing, and stared at two steamer trunks standing on end in the middle of the otherwise empty unit. No hoard, no clutter, nothing but those two steamer trunks. Carol glanced at me from the corner of her eye and told me to shut up. Then she patted her hands together. Well, you take one trunk, and I'll take the other, and we'll get out of here in half the time. Whatever floats your boat. We still on for lunch? You and your appetite. And with that, we strolled up to the trunks and opened them. Years of memories spilled out in a flood of photos and letters and toys. We stood there in stunned silence. What is this? The overwhelming sight numbed me. How do we sort this out? Where do we begin? Well, I dropped to my knees. I guess we start digging. Carol nodded blankly and followed my lead. Together, we sifted through the life of this discarded person, someone we knew nothing about, awed at what we touched, held, and read. Out of this confused detritus of an enigma's life blossomed a persona of love and caring that eluded everyone who thought they knew her. In this kaleidoscope of wonder, we buried ourselves until I stretched and glanced at my watch. God almighty, we've been sitting here for almost 6 hours. It's 2:45. Carol sat back and crossed her legs, holding what appeared to be a letter. Hey. Her voice broke, and large tears began to roll down her face. You gotta read this. She held it out to me. The paper shook in her hand. A large knot twisted in my stomach. For an instant, I stared at her swaying hand. I didn't want to read whatever was written on that page, but an urge somewhere deep inside forced me to take it. At first, I only saw Carol's eyes and the strange, frightening focus they held. But then the words, written in a graceful script, sucked the breath from my lungs and left me gasping. My hand flopped in my lap, my arm weakened by the weight of the message. I stared at the trunk's latch, gathering my thoughts and fighting to still my pounding heart. I turned to Carol as a new wave of tears crested in her eyes. You're my sister. She answered with a rapid nod and hid her quivering lips behind her hands. My God, but why? How? I waved my hand toward the contents of the open trunk. I think this is starting to make sense. I pushed aside the clutter, digging toward the bottom corner, and stopped. I pulled out a birth certificate, mine, and held it up with 2 fingers like it was radioactive. She held a similar one up to me. The certificates list Zoe as our mother, but no father. Deflating thoughts of illegitimacy flooded my mind, stopped by Carol's words. Read the second page of the letter, she said, her voice thinning. Bile-laced fear lashed the back of my throat, but the sour taste receded, overwhelmed by my need to know. The muscles in my throat swelled. I couldn't read the words for the blurring in my eyes. Blinking, a wet saltiness spilled into my mouth. I looked at Carol, my fading words pushed across my lips in wisps. He raped her. Twice! The bastard raped her twice! Carol threw her arms around my neck. I'm glad the son of a bitch is dead. I could kiss whoever killed him. We relished the comfort of each other's arms, and finally withdrew, sitting back and inhaling languid breaths, drained of emotion and strength. I wiped my face with my shirt sleeve and gazed at Carol. Well, I chuckled. Sis, what now? She leaned her head back and took a deep breath, puffing out her cheeks and blowing the air toward the ceiling. Then her head slumped against her chest. I don't know. Bro. The metal walls of the unit rattled with shrieks of laughter. I slanted my head toward her. But, I mean, He was your... Sorry. I mean, our father raped our mother. Well, until now we knew him as my father. She chuckled. What a fucking shock. But, I mean, did our mothers know? Is that why we ended up with her surrogate twin sisters? I don't know, and to tell you the truth, I don't care. I've wondered why I never felt a connection to my parents. Now I know. They aren't my parents. Shit. Here's the clincher. I pulled a photo of Zoe from the pile. She must have been around 20. I handed it to Carol. She was quite a knockout. No wonder your dad couldn't keep his hands off her. Take a look at her pinky. Carol brought the photo closer, then studied her own pinky, and then mine. Same birthmark. A dark sadness pained me, and my eyes blurred. Carol brushed a tear from my cheek. I know what you're thinking. I would have liked to have known her, too. We wrapped our arms around each other and pulled each other close like the lost brother and sister we were. I kissed her cheek. Thanks, sis. I needed that. Uh-huh. She took the letter and reread the second page. What did you make of this last paragraph? I didn't get that far. She handed it back and I read it a half-dozen times. Remove the tape from the anchor. I glanced at the trunks and the piles surrounding us. I don't know. These trunks must be 100 years old. I don't have a dot. I stopped, staring at the interior of my trunk, then Carol's. Scenes of the early 1900s decorated the interior linings. Famous destinations adorned the lining of her trunk, and famous cruise liners adorned mine. Wait a minute. I emptied my trunk and scrutinized the lining. The Titanic sat at anchor in one corner. I shined the light from my phone, and a 5 or 6 inch piece of clear tape, starting at the Titanic's anchor chain, gleamed. I pulled the tape, revealing a tear in the fabric behind it. As I peeled the fabric back, Carol squeezed closer, peering over my shoulder. I heard her breath stop. Beneath the fabric was a thin brown envelope and another photo. I glanced up at her. More surprises? Let's see 'em, damn it. I pulled the photo out. Carol gasped. This was taken at the roadhouse, where my dad was murdered. I brought the photo closer and squinted at the 2 figures at the bar. Shit. Those 2 at the bar are our dads. Yeah, and by the looks, yours is about to punch mine. He really looks pissed. I flipped it over. It's dated. Carol snatched the photo from my hand and choked a soft gulp. Jesus, that's the night he was killed. I'm sure my face reflected her look of confusion. Like, is it possible? Did my dad murder yours? She tilted her head and squeezed the tip of her tongue between her lips. She must have read my mind. It's possible. But why? She murmured. I gave her a half-hearted shrug. I don't know. Jealousy? I sensed my eyes suddenly widening as the idea sunk in. Crap, were they fighting over Zoe? Did my dad have designs on her too? Only one way to find out. Ask him. Carol jumped to her feet, but I grabbed her arm before she could leave. Wait. I held up the brown envelope. We haven't opened this yet. She knelt as I tore the envelope's flap and removed 2 sheets of paper. I don't think we need to ask. I waved one in front of her nose. This is a sworn deposition. Carol took it and read it. Everything we need to know is there. How your dad raped her and threatened her, and that my dad didn't kill him. I don't understand. Why did she wait? Why didn't she go to the police? Who knows? She's gone. I rubbed the stubble on my cheek. But I have a theory. What? Revenge. You're kidding. I shook my head. A warm flood of satisfaction swept over me. Nope. He was always a suspect, and she knew he was in a miserable marriage. Hell, I was there. I saw it. Obviously, he didn't know she knew. Whatever it was she knew. But then maybe she got more satisfaction out of watching him wallow in his own personal hell, drinking his life away, broke, living with a woman who hated him. I know Mom wouldn't leave him because she wanted him to be miserable. Maybe she knew too. He wouldn't get a divorce because all sorts of shit would come out about him. Wow, you gotta be angry to wait that long. Holy crap. My mouth dropped. What? I held up the second sheet. This is her will. Carol sat up. Did you know she was married? She shook her head. 35 years. Her husband died 6 years ago, which explains your choice as executor, I guess. Well, what's in the will? My saliva turned to sand. I shoved the paper toward her. The more she read, the wider her eyes became. She slapped the palm of her hand over her mouth. Is that a $sign with 5 zeros behind it? My head bowed toward her in 2 quick, stunned nods. Carol broke into a hysterical laugh. She left everything to us. Where did she get it? Who cares? If that ain't revenge. I turned a sober look her way. What now? It took her a long moment to contain her laughter. Then it sank in. Get a lawyer? That's a good start. I clasped my hands around hers. We've learned a lot today. Good things about you and me. I just hope her will, what she gave us, won't come between us. She smiled. Never. Let's talk options with the lawyer and... She surveilled the residue of Zoe's secret life. Come back and clean this up later. I don't think I can handle any more revelations. No truer words were spoken. How about pizza and a pitcher of beer? I'm ready. She pulled the padlock key from her pocket. I'll lock up and meet you outside. Oh. I stopped and picked up a small envelope and handed it to her. This was clipped to the back of the will. It's addressed to you. Me? She turned it over in her hand. Take your time. I'll wait outside. Carol rolled the door closed and locked the padlock. She put the key in her pocket, opened the envelope, and removed a photo. Her breath hung in her throat. She dropped it like it burned her fingers and stumbled toward the exit, but then turned, ran back, and snatched it from the floor. She stared at it, mumbling, "That's me, at the roadhouse." She shot quick glances up and down the hallway and collapsed against the wall, rubbing the back of her hand across her lips. Closing her eyes for a moment, she rolled her head from side to side and then read the notations on the back of the photo. Dated the night her father died, the sweat ran down her neck in rivulets and her flesh turned cold. Below the date, 8 words, penned in Zoe's graceful script, closed the door to her enigmatic life. I know you killed him. He deserved it. Marie Antoinette. Squat, beige and Soviet. The Marie Antoinette apartments stood against the stale gray Minneapolis sky. Irony of the worst kind, he thought, blandly ugly and unconscious. He would take exquisitely self-aware irony any day over this 3-story architectural monstrosity, classed up with tacked-on Ionic Greek columns, harsh blue LED Christmas lights wrapped inexpertly around them, canned Christmas classics pumping through the air. God, this place was only better than minimum security prison by a hair. But it was all he could afford now, so he'd just have to lower his eyes and his standards every time he approached. He tried to avoid the other people in the building, but a few of the near indigent souls, especially the family across the hall, insisted on pestering him with their lowbrow holiday cheer, the cheap gift of homemade cookies. the invitation of a seat at their dinner table on Christmas night on the flip side of a child's crude drawing of a Christmas tree slipped under his door. All this might have been more bearable if anyone he knew now understood why the Marie Antoinette apartments pained his soul, filled him with righteous rage. He'd certainly never get that from his obtuse, court-appointed therapist, a small, garish woman whose office and clothing reeked of TJ Maxx. So, he amused himself by using up their 50 minutes, complaining about how much he hated living there. His fingers itched to blow the place up, Her told her, to set it alight. She told him there were healthier ways to channel and examine his negative emotions, so he could eventually let them go. He needed to think about what the Marie Antoinette represented to him, she told him, to look deeper, and to perhaps think about its positive attributes instead. This made him laugh hysterically. How much deeper can I go than living inside the damned building? Should I dive into the meaning of my laminate, faux wood floors and formica kitchen counters, the rancid smell of old cooking that oozes from the graying, cracked walls studded with nail holes and abandoned archaeological remnants of tape from all the miserable souls who inhabited the purgatory before me? How about the rust-stained, leaking toilet and body oil-marked tub? Should I look for Rorschachs in its grimy patterns? That's not what I meant, she said quietly. And you know it. Well, I cherish my negative emotions, he said, suddenly tired. They're the only things keeping me going these days. Till near morning, a couple of weeks before Christmas, after one too many sleeping pills, he had a vivid dream. It started out of focus as he dragged himself toward the Marie Antoinette, bearing his usual cloak of heavy gray resignation, and pushed hard against the main door, as he always had to. Only this time, the door sprang open, and instead of jarring, cold Christmas music, warm strains of exquisite chamber music vibrated through him. All came into focus. The entryway had grown to twice its size, the gray, nondescript industrial carpet replaced with a glowing mahogany parquet floor. Instead of aluminum mailboxes and a frameless wall mirror on either side of the narrow space, giant gilt mirrors reflecting golden candlelight and gold and cream fleur-de-lis silk wallpaper covered the walls. The walls heaved outward until the room became what it wanted to be, a grand palace ballroom, complete with gently tinkling, candle-lit chandeliers. A ballroom for him alone. The effect was ostentatious, but stunning, the way his ex-wife had decorated their homes in the city, on the island, at the lake, near the slopes, their homes for every preposition, all gone now. He dream-prayed he had died and gone to heaven, but he awoke to the same ordinary life, the drab apartment, a shift at the same greasy job, and another boring session after it with his therapist, the only person he ever said more to than, "Can I take your order, would you like fries with that?" A woman he would have sneered at, if not ignored, in his old life, and would again someday when his luck turned. Would he tell her about his dream? He decided he would. It seemed safe enough, wasn't about the past, the present, or even the future. It was just a dream. But was it? As his workday dragged on, the customers who filed into the restaurant looked at him, smiling with something more, it seemed to him, than mere pre-Christmas cheer. He began to wonder if the dream wasn't a message. Maybe his luck was about to turn. He'd paid his dues after all. That old feeling began to tingle again. By the time his 4 o'clock appointment with TJ, as he'd taken to calling her, even to her face, arrived, he'd decided he must keep the dream to himself until he knew more. He had to get through the session, get home, eat a little something, and take his sleeping pills. You seem distracted today, TJ said late in the hour. Something happened this week? Same old, same crappy job, same crappy apartment. He shifted his gaze to the pressed board, "Believe" plaque near the window before she could read him, but she was astute, this small, tacky woman. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw her cock her head. You're not complaining like you usually do. Did something change? Like I said, nope. Maybe I've adjusted to living in a shithole, I don't know. He attempted to give her an aw shucks grin, but felt his face contorting in weird ways, so he scrambled to throw her a bone. Have I told you about my neighbors across the way? He leaned back and sneered, coming up with an awful lie. I'd swear to God she's killing him sometimes, and man, I wish she'd succeed so I can get some rest. What do you think it means, Doc, that I don't care if he dies? TJ sighed and drummed her red fingernails on her thigh. It's Clauso 450, she said. Let's just pick this up next week. Tilda. The dream started the same as before. Heavy quotidian dread as he approached the stunted building, growing excitement and wonder as it opened to a Versailles-like hall of mirrors. But this time, the hall was filled with people. Giant people. People twice his height, in silken 18th century finery, swirling and spinning around the room, wind-up dolls and white wigs with faces he recognized. His old clients, wealthy people he'd cheated and stolen from for years, people he'd fooled into being his friends, people from the life he wanted back desperately. He tried to speak, to get their attention, but nothing came, not even air. As he watched, the dancers grew larger. Wait, no, he grew smaller. He was shrinking, becoming more and more insignificant. An insect, a speck, dirt. He would always be dirt. Tilda. He stumbled through the rest of the week, his nights vast and dreamless. TJ seemed surprised to see him in the waiting room early but said nothing. He sat on her couch, cleared his throat. I had this dream, he said, that my building became a palace, but one I will never have access to again. His voice shook. She handed him the tissue box. Yes. He gave her a brief description of the dream. What do you think it means? She asked. Isn't that your job? No, she said simply, and crossed her arms, waiting. I guess. I don't think I'll ever again have the life I had before. I don't think, he said, swallowed. I deserve it. No, she said again, not clarifying what she meant, which oddly made him feel more respect for her. So, what now? That's up to you. Well, a hint might be nice, he whispered, wanting to scream. He swallowed. You are my damn therapist after all. Okay. What do you miss most about your old life? Not from in here. She tapped her head. Not ego. From here. She tapped her chest. Heart. What do you really miss? He shook his head. I don't know. Without those things on the table, nothing. I mean, I don't have kids. My ex-wife was a money-grubbing bitch, and my friends... Shit, I didn't really have those. Maybe luck. But that's not what you mean either. I know what you're getting at, but you're barking up the wrong tree. She smiled, the first full smile he'd seen from her since they'd met, before she'd gotten to know him. I don't think so. I think you're getting somewhere. Maybe your dream was telling you more than you think. Like I've said before, dig deeper, go further. The answers are there, inside that building and inside you. He choked back a snarky, whatever Obi-Wan, and nodded at her. Glancing at the clock above the door, he stood, smoothing his sweaty palms against his jeans. Hold on. She held up a finger and smiled again. I have something for you." He stared, not comprehending. She turned to fish something out of a paper bag, then turned back, holding out a flat package wrapped in green tissue paper and red curly ribbon. Of course, Christmas was only 4 days away. He stammered, cheeks reddening. "I didn't get you anything." He didn't know why he was embarrassed, which only made him blush harder. She laughed. "I was not expecting you to. Don't worry about it, it's no big deal." "Merry Christmas." "Merry, yeah," he said, looking down at his name. Jeb, in black marker on the paper, an inexpertly drawn holly leaf and berries below it. A feeling spread, not altogether unpleasant, replacing ungenerous thoughts about the cheesy gift she'd likely procured at TJ Maxx. "Thank you, Geraldine," he mumbled and bumbled out the door. Tilda. He worked Christmas Eve day, took the bus, and trudged home as the sun set again too early, the day again too short, carrying his fast food dinner and a bottle of California Pinot Noir he'd splurged on. It was only 4, but it felt like midnight, and his near unfurnished apartment felt more featureless and tired and depressing than prison ever had been. Because it was his choice to leave it so, he realized. He had nowhere else to go, so he busied himself with eating and drinking, the food cold and congealed, and the wine's mediocrity disappointing. Folding up the empty, redolent burger paper and fries box, he glanced at the present Geraldine had given him, still unopened on the kitchen counter. He wasn't sure whether he'd saved it because it was his only gift, or because he didn't really care about it. Either way, he might as well open it now. He washed his greasy hands in the kitchen sink and poured another glass of wine. He picked up the gift and carefully untied the red ribbon, did his best not to tear the green paper as he picked at the tape, then slid the paper away. Not a tacky nothing after all, but a green, leather-bound book, like the ones his ex-wife had bought by the shelf-load from antiquaries to decorate their homes, curated for color and size rather than content. But this wasn't inert decoration. It was chosen for him to read. He snorted. Crime and punishment. He knew the gist of the story, though he suspected he'd have to read it to get the nuances she intended. Funny. He found himself looking forward to it. His doorbell rang. Book in hand, still smiling with surprised respect for Geraldine. He answered the door to find the frazzled woman from across the hall. "Hi. Jeb, right?" Her grin was crooked, a little shy, infectious. He nodded, and she said, "Marissa, you never responded to our invite to dinner for tomorrow evening. Can you make it? We'd be glad to have you. We're making turkey with all the fixings. A couple other neighbors are coming." He considered this only a moment, tasting the oily coating of his pitiful dinner as he licked his lips. "You know what? Yes, Marissa. I'd be honored. Can I bring anything? Just yourself." She grinned again. 6 o'clock sharp, if that's okay, because of the Munchkins' early bedtime. "Sure," he said, finding himself grinning in response. 6. Great. She glanced at his book, then inside the doorway at his near-bare apartment. "Looks like a bookshelf is in order, huh? Maybe even a sofa." She laughed. He couldn't help but laugh with her. "Yes," he said. "It's time." Again, that soft, warm lightness pushing out something hard and heavy he hadn't even known was there. What was it? Only later, while lying on his second-hand mattress on the floor, after he'd read the long first part of the leather-bound book about young, impoverished Raskolnikov scheming and rationalizing his decision to murder a pawnbroker for her money, did it come to him. Like Raskolnikov, he'd lost something along the way, something essential and tender that had shriveled to a hard stone inside him once he began to drip Ponzi scheme money. Something poor little rich girl Marie Antoinette likely never knew her entire tragic gold-plated life. That night he dreamt again, a simple dream. The Marie Antoinette Apartments remained an ugly pedestrian building, but he entered with lightness, that warmth down to his bones. He greeted neighbors in the lobby by name, delivered groceries to the housebound old lady down the hall, went into his simply but warmly furnished apartment to make himself a nourishing meal. Christmas morning, he leapt out of bed. If he was lucky, he might find gifts for the children across the hall before noon, not in it for the money. I was a hacker for almost as long as I can remember. Even as a kid, I lived to mess around with computers, programming, writing and cracking codes, and surfing to the darkest edges of the internet. What I couldn't learn from manuals, chat rooms, message boards, or friends I pretty much just figured out on my own. So early on I knew that hacking would make me way more money than flipping burgers at Mickey D's, earning a college diploma, or even scoring a high-paying job on Wall Street, and with a lot less of the mess and stress that usually accompanies your average 9-to-5 gig. But it was never about money. And things have changed since then, which was why I'd retired. For obvious reasons, I can't tell you my name. And after you read this, you won't be able to trace it back to my IP address it was sent from, since I've developed and used a multi-level super encryption masking and scrubbing device to send this screed. So, why am I taking the risk of getting back into the game, stepping out of the shadows and into the grid, by divulging this secret to the New York Times? Because of the way they've ruined it for all of us. I've had enough and just can't stomach it anymore. Who are they, you ask? In 2 words, today's hackers. These hackers today. They've no respect and are almost always in it only for the money. When I was in the hacking game, it was all about changing the world and making a difference. Sure, every now and then we'd line our own pockets a bit, with enough to cover expenses and then some. But for me, unlike them, it wasn't about the money. Maybe it's just the lone wolf versus mob mentality. Today's hackers are not only creating chaos, but they make no distinction of who it is directed toward. For them, there are no good or bad guys, only easy pickings. And because they do that, it reflects poorly upon our past and present hacker communities as a whole. It's their ransomware attacks that really piss off most of us legit hackers. Nowadays, the bigger their haul, the more likely these greed-fueled Robin Hoodish banditos will invest it in specialization and franchising. They've certainly gotten better at it over the years. Remember the Colonial Pipeline assault? It may have not been the most costly hack attack from 2021 to 2022. Only $4.4 million was made from that hack. But the downtime caused by lost business and revenue was far more financially damaging to them than the ransom size. The WannaCry virus was far bigger in the number of computers it infected, 300,000 plus, and resulted in $6 billion USD of damage, albeit the blackmail payout dollar size wasn't the top dollar in brides for that period. Well, I, for one, want to put a stop to it now. Here's a short list of today's greatest hacker hits. Coming in hot at number 1 for 2021 is the insurance company, Can Financial Corp, for a whopping $40 million, which was a record liberation money amount paid up to that point. The second was meat producer JBS's payment of $11 million US, followed by GPS system manufacturer Garmin for $10 million, an unidentified Austrian organization, $4.7 million, CWT Global Travel Services, $4.5, Brenntag, a chemical distributor, $4.4, Travelex, $2.3, resulting in the corporation's declared bankruptcy, fashion company Fat Face Ltd, $2.0, and then $1.14 million extorted from San Francisco's University of California. Do the math and tally it up. That's a grand total of nearly 85 million US dollars. As 2022 began, so did more digital assaults, beginning with the FlexBooker data breach on January 3rd. The Red Cross charity organization was the next innocent victim. Then came Crypto.com, multiple Credit Suisse banks, universities, hospitals, and even the Costa Rican government. Now, with nearly 36 other major thefts occurring thus far in a year, with still 3 months to go, it's really getting out of hand, isn't it? When today's hackers set their sights on specific ransom amounts, they normally take into account several factors. 1. The size of the infected network. 2. The target's overall net worth, including revenue and clients' accounts held in escrow. 3. The plane of data sensitivity being breached, and that's the way they do it. It not only hurts organizations and businesses out there that put good into the world, but even reputable hackers such as me. Therefore, this really has to stop, and there's only one way to paralyze today's hackers dead in their tracks, to halt them from fermenting further mischief. So, what's a respectable hacker of yesteryear ever to do these days? Basically, the way I'd decided to deal with it is not stooping to their level. That was up until the day when I had this idea. We, the good guy hackers of yesterday, need to band together and go after all the bad guy hackers of today to fight fire with fire. In other words, globally, the good must unite with one another to go after these nefarious computer criminals to hit them where it'll hurt the most. We hack the bad guys. I've been developing a unique virus that'll infect their devices and which would A, identify offenders so the rest of the world could detect them and out these blackmailers, B, temporarily lock down their software until the threat's resolved, and C, permanently disable and damage beyond repair any hardware used by chronic repeat offenders to stop them and wipe out their access to easy cash flow. With every day that's passed, I got closer to my goal, to halt and hurt today's malicious hackers. And now, I feel I may have cracked that code to allow me access via a back door in all computers that'll leave those greedy bastards defenseless. I'm almost there. And come tomorrow, my friends, sweet revenge. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator, I'm back,